Okay. All right. So I apologize for the folks waiting outside the room because we're packed in here. But thank you for coming. We're going to get started, okay? This is about an hour session, about 50 minutes, but we're the last one of the day, so, all depends how long these guys have. But I'm John LaRock with Team 365. This is the Chairman's Chat. We've been running this for a long time. Raise your hands if you've been to this before. I know that many of you are new, so raise your hands. A couple of you. Wow. Okay, so you still came. Even better. So this is the Chairman's Chat. We're going to be talking about the Chairman's Award, the Hall of Fame. We have a great group of panelists here who've been through this, and also some folks who've made this possible for people to go through it, or some judges. So let's just hear it for the panel. We're going to do an introductions, but let's hear it for the panel here. You got a great panel. And let's get started because we want to introduce the panel. So if you just give your name, your team number, you're one of the chairmen if you remember, and we'll keep going. We'll move it through pretty quickly. Go ahead.
My name is Chris, Team 987. We won in 2016.
My name is Colin, Team 2614. We won in 2017.
My name is Alex, also from 2614.
Hi, Janelle from 503. We won 2021.
Hey, I'm Karthik, Team 1114. We won 2012.
I'm Sarah from 3132, and we won in 2017.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kirsten from Team 341 Miss Daisy, and we won in 2010.
Hi, I'm Rachel. I'm from Team 1816, The Green Machine, and we won in 2019.
I am Jay. I was on 3132, and we won in 2017.
Hi, I'm Kathy. I'm with the Holy Cows, and we won in 2013.
Hi, I'm Priscilla, and I'm a chairman's judge.
I'm Bill, and I'm also a chairman's judge.
I'm Tom from Team 503 also. We won in 2021.
Howard Cohen from 359 Hawaiian Kids. We won in 2011.
Hi, I'm Ruby, Team 1902, and we won in 2019 here in Houston.
Elise, and I'm also with 1902, 2019.
For 613, I'm Diane, and we won in 2021.
So let's hear it again for everybody that's up here. We have a request, and obviously the Chairman's Award, the Hall of Fame, gracious professionalism first. If there are, because there are people out here with different teams that aren't in here, if you have a team here that has more than 2 people, if you could be so gracious as to maybe the additional people, if they could leave so we can get some other teams in here who don't have anybody, that would be really awesome. And let's hear it for the folks that are doing this for us. Thank you very much. Sorry about that. I mean, we're stuck with the room we've got. So look at all the seats. Bring them in. Okay, so we're going to go through this again. So we'll get started in about 5 minutes, I guess. Thank you, everybody. Let's hear it again for everybody that's being so gracious to let other people get in this room. Yes. We're trying. Well, it's your choice. We're asking if people can just have 2 people. So it's your choice. You have 2 teams. That's right. So I guess that would work. You got Karthik asking the question, so I guess you're good. Okay. All right. Okay. So if we have, I guess we're funneling out and funneling back in. So while they're doing that, let's just ask a question to this group. So Kathy, you had the question. You want to ask it to the group?
Sure. We were just curious. Do all of you know what the Hall of Fame is and what we do? They do. A few of you. Awesome.
Okay.
All right. Karthik, do you want to explain? Because you're so good at explaining it.
Go ahead, Karthik.
So, with the question, how many of you know what the Chairman's Award is? Okay, all right. So you understand that. So, teams who win the Chairman's Award at the championship are named Championship Chairman's Award winner. but they are also inducted into the first Hall of Fame. And the first Hall of Fame is a group of all the past Championship Chairman's Award winners. And to a certain degree, we're the kind of the keepers of the culture of the Chairman's Award and trying to make sure that the Chairman's Award remains prominent. The organization started as a group that was just like, yeah, you win, you get this recognition of being in the first Hall of Fame. You get to go to championship forever, which was a thing, which is not necessarily a thing going forward, but that's a whole other story. But most importantly, we see it as our responsibility to advocate for the Chairman's Award, keep people informed about the Chairman's Award, and keeping the focus of the first robotics competition on more than just the robots, but why you're all here for the Chairman's Award. And if you think about the Chairman's Award at its core is about fulfilling first mission. And first mission is about changing culture. So the Hall of Fame is about promoting the change of culture to achieve first mission and celebrating all of that. And so that's part of why we do this Chairman's Chat right here, is to help teams who are on their way to Chairman's Awards to learn more and to be able to get feedback and get advice and that sort of thing. All right. So
Okay, we have a question in front here. So let me. So this is basically a discussion. Elise, do you want to say something? Oh, chairs. We're pointing chairs. So sorry, we're not quite there with the question yet. While folks are funneling in, this is really a discussion. We don't have any prepared slides. But we have a lot of history and experience so we can have questions for judges of the Chairman's Award. How many of you are vying for the Chairman's Award at this event? Raise your hands. Congratulations. All right. So we also have you can ask the esteemed panel of experts that are in the Hall of Fame, or ask a question for the judges. So I'm going to start taking questions here. Okay. So who wants the first question? Raise your hands. You in the back. You're all going to try to get this. Well, I don't know if I'll get this. See how loud you can be. Be a little louder. We're trying to tape it, but real loud. Go ahead.
Okay. I wanted to ask the judges, what is your advice for teams who are not native in English?
The advice for teams who are not native in English.
Well, you do have the opportunity to have a translator, which you might want to take advantage of, but I personally haven't had any issues with teams that don't have English as a first language. They either usually present in English or they have a translator, and it always works out very, very good.
In addition to that, I would also say that one of the best things a team can do is slow down and speak more, maybe a little slowly, work on being as clear as possible. It's generally not a problem, but oh, by the way, that's good advice for all teams. Probably the single biggest complaint that judges have is teams talk too fast. And we feel like we're drinking from a fire hose, so to speak, okay? So just slow down, relax, and the judges are going to do everything they can to understand, and if they don't understand, they'll ask the question.
Thank you. We'll do another judge question. We'll go to the other panel. So anybody have another judge question? Yes, right there. Go ahead. Why don't you stand up and be as loud as you can? Okay, go ahead. Just repeat the question. Teams that can't or have a hard time doing international outreach. Judges, do you have?
So, who wants it?
Whoever wants it.
The answer is no. Just because you don't do international outreach does not negate any of your other accomplishments. Really, the Chairman's Award is about what are you doing in your community, however you define community, to make an impact. So if you define community as your small town, that's perfect. If you define it larger, even better, but you're not losing points or gaining points for doing international outreach.
Can I take it a step further and say something controversial? I think that there are many teams out there who do international outreach and it actually hurts them because they spend so much time focusing on what can we do outside of America or whatever country that you're based in, instead of having a bigger impact where they currently are, right? Chairman's Award is about culture change. And if you're going overseas and doing culture change, that's great. But if you could be having a bigger impact in your community, that's even better.
And on the topic of international, I have two comments here, but on the topic of international outreach has to be done carefully. There is a litany of history of folks trying to do outreach in international nations, and it's called colonialism. And it can be problematic because this idea that everyone needs our help, and it's not necessarily like that. So international outreach can't just be, oh, hey, we're gonna find a school here and drop some Lego kits in and just leave. Because sometimes that can be damaging, because sometimes you go in there and the school is expecting more, and it actually is a step back in that sort of direction. So international outreach, I think the folks who are doing it, it's really important to consult with experts on international development and make sure you're partnering with the right organizations to learn, because as first teams, we learn lots of new skills and we learn lots of new things, but you need to, just like when you're building a robot, you learn from experts in industry, and you need to do that sort of thing with outreach. The other piece I want to mention is it's important for teams to focus on what they're good at and what they believe in. I think there's a tendency for teams, in their region, they see the Chairman's Award video from this year and they're like, oh, we need to do that now. But that's not how you win yourself. It's about finding out what works for you. I talk about this a lot, but on 11-14, we were good at building robots. That was what our strength was. So we focused our outreach on building robots. We were not going to show up at maple syrup festivals or write songs or do any of these esoteric things that other teams were doing because they were good at them and we weren't. So we focused on what we were good at, which was delivering resources related to robots. And that we didn't do a lot of the other, I look at a team who won a couple years before us, Miss Daisy, you were much better at the other types of outreach and getting that, it just wasn't us. So we focused on what was us. And I think, you said your team can't do, that's totally okay. It's really, really important. And it's like when you're building a robot. If you try and do everything, most teams who try and do everything just end up doing a bunch of things mediocre. So with your chairmans, it's the same sort of thing. Focus on what you're good at and focus on what the students want to do. So chairmans is no longer a chore. It's like, oh yeah, we like doing this. If you you don't want to do international outreach, but your one mentor says, oh, well, team XYZ did it, we have to do it. You're not going to do a good job at international outreach. So focus on what you want to do and who you are and be the best you that you can be.
So to say in a little bit different way than Karthik did is don't chase the last winner. That was something that we really had to stop and say, what are we interested in? What are we good at? What are we passionate about? Don't chase what the last winner did, because that's not you. And you have to be authentic or it's not going to come through. And then I also wanted to expand on the international piece. A lot of us step out of our community to do outreach. That might be the next town you're helping the team. That might be 30 miles away. It might be the urban center that's close to you. It might be international. Whenever you do that, make sure you stop and listen, that you meet the students and the teams where they are. So this goes back to what Karthik was saying about don't try to take what works in your neighborhood and necessarily transpose it to another neighborhood, whether that's next door, 30 miles away, across the ocean. You have to stop and listen. What is that team facing? What does that community need? How can we take the tools that we have and adapt them for their needs? So that's another tough lesson that we learned.
Very good. Thank you. Next question. Yes, go ahead. And then once you stand up, I'll get the mic to you because I can.
Okay, so let's say our team, for all intents and purposes, does not have any experience with chairmans and is planning to submit for the first time next year. What would you recommend as the process for preparing for that, and how do we tackle chairmans?
Great questions. Takers? Howard?
Sometimes we fall into this habit of starting chairmans when the build season begins. You don't need to do that. You can start chairmans literally tomorrow, because the chairman's essay, or soon to be the impact award, you're going to need to do one, and you're still going to need to do outreach or whatever you may do. but you could start listing out what you want to do and how you want to approach the problem. Something that we did is we started before the build season so that we weren't doing it during the build season. And it also helped free up other students who may be working on the essay and at the same time trying to build a robot and at the same time trying to go to school and, work on their class and grades.
To add to that, documentation. Start documenting now. Start writing down everything you've ever done as a team, and every time you do something, add to it. And then that way you'll have it just to be able to go back and look at it. You'll be able to see the building, and you may even be able to see trends over time of where your team is making the biggest impact, where you're doing the best work for your team, where your students are really enjoying things. And you can kind of narrow in on your focuses. You can find your strengths that way too. And I also recommend at the end of every year having a team meeting where you review everything you did throughout the season and refocus those efforts. Like, how can we do this better, or do we want to continue doing this? And in your process.
Also, reach out to your local Hall of Fame team. We are obsessed with the Chairman's Award. That's why we're all sitting here. And we love coming and talking to teams. And you can reach out to us if you don't have a team that you know locally to you. We have a website, and we're on social media. First Hall of Fame, go follow us. And we would love to chat with all of you more. So reach out to us.
Thanks, Sarah. Question up here. Go ahead, Kirsten. Sorry.
I just wanted to bring up one quick point that we were all talking about earlier too. If you're not aware, all of the previous award submissions are available online, and a lot of us have uploaded our videos and even some of our faux interview things. So we just wanted to make sure you guys all knew that that was also available too. So if you're thinking oh, should I write this essay in a weird thematic, thing that matches my team? Yeah, maybe you'll find another example where they won doing something really unique. So I would check that out too.
Thanks, Kirsten.
This would be a pre-COVID question. For those of you that have international outreach, did you actually take your team or a large group of students outside the United States, and what challenges did you have with coordinating and getting permissions for that?
So first things first, I want to say if you are thinking of or are doing international outreach, you don't need to physically go there. For a lot of people, it's really hard, and it's very expensive. And for a whole team especially, it's hard to organize, it's hard to get permission, it's hard to just do everything around that. Of course, it is really good to be able to go to that place and to be able to have an in-person impact, but you don't need to. But if you are planning on actually going, it does take a lot of prior planning, much like coming to Houston, much like going to any event. And I don't want you to think of it as an event, but I want you to plan it like that. So when you take your team, it's exactly the same. But when you go to a place, it's for fun. And it's for teaching, it's for learning, it's for passion. And no matter where you go, it's gonna be like that. So you should let your kids know if you're a mentor, and you should let your teammates know that the most important thing about going to somewhere and to helping a team or an area or community is to just make connections. And that's really important for everyone.
To kind of build on that, sometimes we forget that we want to do this outreach, but take a moment to also kind of absorb the culture of where you're going. Obviously we go there and we kind of bring our own stuff. And then to kind of directly answer your question, talk to your school board before you kind of, think about these things, and then kind of figure out all the little logistical things that we need. My team's had the honor of going to a couple of different places and countries throughout our history. But the one quick story is we went to Japan one year, and we had worked with a travel agent company and trying to get all this stuff together. And even when we dotted our I's, crossed our T's, we still had a problem with one student where it turned out that his passport or his visa just wasn't working. And we had to really kind of talk to the customs and border agents to really try to, we can't just send this kid back alone on a flight. And we need to do this stuff. So really, make sure you check all the logistical stuff before you kind of talk about it and say that you want to do it. And make sure it's feasible, because there are some teams who go to other countries and they use so much of their own funding, so much of their own sponsorship, that they almost burn their team out, and they kind of, the treasury of their team kind of drains out. And don't burn yourself out trying to do all these different types of things.
Going back to the logistical side of things, yeah, make sure your students all have the right passports. We had 2 students with foreign passports that had trouble coming back into the United States. As far as like the international side, if you have the opportunity to go, like absolutely you should. But when 987 went, we had a lot of support from like other teams and other organizations, like mostly 525 Sword Dogs. That would have not have happened if it wasn't for them. So as far as international goes, I don't want to say something has to fall into your lap, but definitely work on what you're good at, work on your home, and if someone reaches out to you and wants you to come out and wants your help and your expertise because of what you've done in your community, then it's a good opportunity to reach out and go international. But I don't think it's something that First is expecting you guys to do. The culture change, like you guys are leaders in your communities, not needing to go around the world.
Okay. Bill, let me go and then.
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment, maybe from the judge's perspective about international. Starting maybe 2 questions ago, you guys got a lot of really good advice from the Hall of Fame teams. Every one of them was spot on. I do believe that my personal perception is that to some extent the emphasis on international outreach got started from what one of these teams referred to as chasing last year's winner. Someone who had some success as an international outreach was recognized as a Chairman's Award Hall of Fame team, and others thought that somehow became a requirement. It most certainly is not. What the judges want to hear is, what are you doing as a team to advance the mission and the goals of First? You can do that in your backyard, in your community, just as well as you can across the ocean. If we ever get to a point where every school in America has a First team, then maybe it'll become more important, but that's not the case today. But from the judge's perspective, international teams are a little problematic because, as you know, we have a limited amount of time during the interview. And when you start talking about international outreach, it immediately raises the question in the judge's mind, what exactly was your role in starting this team? Now, you've heard some examples here from the Hall of Fame teams where teams actually traveled to another country, worked with a group of people, and that's great. We want to know how you connected with that team in the first place. And once a relationship was established, what have you done to maintain continuity and sustainability with that team? Did you start a team and then abandon them? Or are you continuing to work with them year after year? Are you actually truly mentoring an international team? But your presentation, if it's focused on international outreach, really needs to communicate to the judges very clearly, how did you find this group of individuals? What were the circumstances? And what are you doing to maintain a long-term relationship? Chairman's Award, as you all know, is very focused on sustained performance. And it always raises a lot of questions, so be sure and be prepared to answer that. Very often when the judges during the Q&A period ask about the details, sometimes we get very clear answers like what you just heard from Howard, and sometimes we get, well, our mentor was over there on business and he talked to somebody about First, and that got a couple of kids interested, and that's how we claim international outreach. That's probably not really what we're looking for in terms of international outreach. We're really looking for a true bonded relationship between two groups of students who are working together to advance First. Okay, so be prepared for a lot of questions.
Just real quickly, going back to your question about logistics. If you are in the room and you are from a team outside the United States of America, can you go ahead and raise your hand? Okay. these are the people who can tell you just how hard it is to take a team overseas. It is not easy. We may do it every year, but that's because we're obsessed in love first. But, you know, organizing passports and travel and permission forms and travel insurance, all these things have to come into it, and talk to someone who does this on an annual basis, because we get good at it, but not because we wanted to.
Another question. Oh, go ahead, Carter.
I think one thing, this is going to apply to everything, not just international outreach. Remember, with the Chairman's Award, you're trying to change culture. You're not trying to tick a box. And if you get into the habit of, oh, these are the things we have to do to win the Chairman's Award, tick box, tick box, tick box, you're not actually going to do the in-depth sorts of things that are needed to change culture, which are actually needed to win this award, especially at the highest levels.
Thank you. Next question, right there. Oh.
So I have a question for anyone. So what would you say is the best advice for resiliency for an unknown problem that you could face, such as like COVID or any other kind of something like that? Resiliency? Yes.
It all goes back to your mission. Who are you as a team, and what do you do? So, you know, if that kind of circles back, do what you love, and you know that everything then falls in place. If you're not loving what you're doing, and COVID was a great kind of like shift for all of that, everything kind of got canceled and paused, and everyone is coming out of this totally different than before. This is a great opportunity to evaluate. What are you doing? And what did you do before COVID? Do you even want to continue? And what are new opportunities? And that, again, you tie that back to your mission. What is your mission as a team? And does that activity fit your mission?
Anyone else over here?
You just said something really good that made me think a thought. Wow. When something happens that's really big, a lot of the time you can feel like, oh, might as well just give up. And that is not the right thing to do. It might feel like it is, but it's not. And one way to combat that is to look at it from the outside and think, how can we turn this into something that is helpful, that we can do something with? So with COVID, so many teams took Zoom calls and YouTube videos and online resources and really made it a whole lot better, because that was the only thing that we had. And that was one way that they made it so that it didn't seem so bad and terrible and like the end of the world. So you need to ask yourself and your team, how do we take that, turn it around, and do something with it?
I think I just wanted to add on to that in terms of how to communicate that resilience in a presentation as well. I think in chairmans, you're always talking about your accomplishments and what you're proud of, but acknowledging those hardships is something that might come as a challenge to some teams. So explaining, you know, what were those challenges, whether it's pandemic related in the last couple of years or what has personally afflicted your team and how you've grown from that, can demonstrate a lot more than just saying these are the end goals that we were able to reach this year. So telling that story in that narrative format is something that can help, you know, communicate that resilience better to the judges as well.
If I could just add one thing from the judges' perspective, after looking at a lot of the teams that won chairmans already this year, a lot of those teams really were continuing to do their work. They came up with creative ways, some solutions out of the box, and some teams even grew in a lot of new ways. So we were really pleased to see the way that a lot of teams adapted.
Good. Question right here.
Yeah, so I know in my team's experience, and I'm sure other people in the room have experienced this as well, is sometimes your team gets known for something. It kind of has its like shtick. And I'm just wondering, from your perspective, does it make sense to stick with that shtick or show how you're bigger than it?
Yep.
Okay, so 1902 was known for big bacon of image and theory of image and marketing for a long time. It was branding was our thing. And in 2016, we started First Like a Girl. And so if there's something else you're passionate about. Our students were really passionate about that. So we didn't turn away from that, but we leaned into that one too. So it really depends on what your students are passionate about. If they're no longer passionate about what you're known for, rebrand.
I would say, as going back, as the team that was probably known for international outreach, we actually got really tired of it because of what we just talked about here for like half an hour. And we went the opposite direction because everyone kept telling us, oh, you guys just keep winning because you're doing everything overseas. And we got so tired of it, we came to America and we did something in America, which was overseas for us, but national for everyone else. So we got tired of it, and like bacon, we went against it a little bit.
So as a team that did the same thing for, I think we're like going on 5 years now or something, we leaned into it because that's what we thought was the most impactful thing we were doing and the most important thing we were doing, and most important for our students when they had that experience. But it became a struggle then when we went into judging. You really, if you are in a situation like that and it is something that you're passionate about and you're going to lean into, make sure when you go into judging that you can explain how you've built it, how, like what did you do this year? What's new about it? How did you make it bigger, more impactful? How did it impact your students? And we had to be very blunt when we went into judging about, and this is what we think is new this year. This is why we keep doing it. So that's kind of on the flip side advice if you do want to stick with your shtick.
Question, I'm going to go back here. So question, you right there. Yeah, can you be loud? Yeah. You throw me in. Okay.
So, as someone who takes style very seriously, I think the most important thing is to look good. But in all seriousness, what we would always tell our presenters was, it's like, what are you comfortable in? There are some high school students, if you try and put them in dress pants and dress shoes, they're going to be fidgety and squirming the whole time. There are other high school students who want nothing more than a chance to dress up for an interview. And I think you really have to play it by the students, and it's what you're comfortable in is matters more than anything. I know you try and put me in a stupid costume with a tutu, I'm going to freak out and just be like, this is not what I want to do. But some people really like that. It's like, oh yeah, I'm in my element. I get to be myself here. And so I personally think it's about making sure the students in the room are comfortable.
I think, so as a person that was on the chairman's team when we won, I have ADHD. And going back to what you said, I was fidgeting all the time, and I was touching my shirt, I was like moving around, and it's really helpful to go back and think, who are you representing in the judging room? If you're wearing a suit, you're not really representing your team. If you're wearing your shirt, you're there with your team, you're there saying, I'm here, I'm with 3132, I'm with 4159, whoever you're with, and you want the judges to see that. I'm not saying it's bad to dress up and want to make a good impression and to make sure that the judges remember you, but make sure you're comfortable, like everyone else said. Make sure you're gonna do the best that you can do, and for me, that was being in jeans, sneakers, my team shirt. Yeah.
My favorite presentations were when I was just in my team shirt. One year they made me dress up like Elvis. Definitely wasn't having a good time there. But whatever fits your presentation, dress up, make an outfit, or just wear your team shirt. I don't think the judges will care as much as they care about what is in your presentation. Focus on that more.
You took the words right out of my mouth. We just want you to be yourselves, and we want to hear your message.
John, excuse
go
me.
ahead.
Just let me make one more comment on that. I agree with everything we've heard, and that the judges truly do want to hear the message. They want to hear about your journey. We don't care that much about what you look like. I would really encourage you to avoid tutus. But one of the things when you're really, the original question was about presentation. And while we aren't that interested in appearances and more interested in the story, the history, appearances in any presentation do matter. And I can't help but remember, I mean, over the years I've seen probably hundreds of Chairman's Award teams, and some of them were memorable. And one of them that I will remember was 3 presenters, 2 young ladies and a young man. And they were wearing what I would call business wear, like they were making a presentation in a boardroom. The young ladies were wearing skirts and blouses, not a crease anywhere, perfectly groomed. The young man standing next to him looked like he slept in his clothes. I mean, really. And I remembered that. So yeah, if you're going to have a look, if I can use that word, make sure that everybody on the presenting team is on the same sheet of music, because it really does help. You don't want to stand out for that reason. Okay.
So this kind of extends on the previous question, but we all know that you guys are seeing hundreds of presentations when the judges are judging us. So what in a presentation really stands out? And in terms of presentation length, is it better to make sure that you're detailed in your presentation and to leave less time for questions, or leave more time for the judges to ask questions?
My recommendation from a judge's perspective is more what you don't want to do. Don't try to tell us your team history. We don't have time to hear it. And the teams who try to give us their entire history are the teams that typically are talking too fast. They feel like they got to cover everything. The judges have read the essay, and the essay is a really good place to put background information about your team. What we really want to hear about in the 7 minutes that we have is, what are you focused on now? What do you perceive to be your most significant achievement in the last 18 to 24 months, and why does that matter? In other words, of all the teams that come through the door, what makes you a standout? And frankly, that's what makes venues like Houston so difficult, because tomorrow we're going to look at 80 teams, and every one of them is a standout just by virtue of the fact that they're here. So focus your presentation on what have you done recently that matters, and leave the history of your team to the essay.
One thing I'd add to that is, the presentation is 7 minutes, so it's important to stick to that time. Give us the time for the questions, but sometimes we don't get a chance to ask enough of the questions we'd like because your answers are very, very long. And you could take 5 minutes to answer the first question. So, keep your answers to the point, short as they can, because our job is to try to get as much information about your team as possible. And we really need that 5 minutes to ask a lot of those questions.
So you just heard from 2 judges, so I almost feel like I should just shut up, because that's who your audience is. But to answer your question, I think we were that team. We had a long history. We had been a chairman's team, so to speak, for a decade, and we had a lot to say. We had 12 minutes worth of content, and by golly, we told you that 12 minutes in 7 minutes. And we're talking way too fast, and you couldn't hear us. And so we really, really made it an effort last year to be harsh and cut a lot of stuff out. But we used the whole the whole 7 minutes, because we didn't want to say, oh, we'll leave that for we did that sometimes. Oh, we'll leave that for Q&A, and they never asked it. So don't leave that on the table. Put it in your presentation. My suggestion would be, use your 7 minutes, say what you need to say, and they'll follow up with questions if they want. But one little hint we learned, we think we noticed, we practiced our thing 100 times to the second, and if it's 7 minutes, we were at 6:59. We nailed it every single time. But we started noticing the judges they get nervous for us. They're like, it's 6:50 and they're still talking. So we actually this year said, we're going to do 6:50. We're going to cut it off 10 seconds early, let the judges have a little relax for us. But so use the time, use all the time. Don't count on Q&A. Q&A is super important. but very super important. But don't give up that time. You want to get your message out, and don't count on them asking you the question you want to hear.
Counterpoint. We aimed for 6:30, somewhere in there, 6.5 minutes, because we felt that Q&A was a strong point for us. And our thing was, we practiced Q&A more than we practiced our presentation. You need to be able to learn to answer questions succinctly. You need to learn to make sure that your presenters will not ramble on. So you need to practice Q&A within that 5-6 minutes that you're going to have over and over and over again. Team 27 has a list of questions that can be a great place to start. First Hall of Fame teams can offer some review time as well to ask questions of you. Document the questions that you get as soon as your students walk out of the room. Write down, have them ask them what the questions were they were asked. Document those, because you can start to see a trend in what the judges are asking. So document those, but practice Q&A, because you already know what you're going to say when you walk in. Be ready to answer the questions about, your team. Be ready to answer them really quickly.
One of the things Karthik said earlier is that this is just like the robot. And you wouldn't send your drive team to championship with zero time practicing, right? That'd be crazy. It's the same thing for your chairman's team. You got to do in the practice just like your drive team does.
Okay, another question. I'm going to get you back there. So you go ahead. Go ahead. Did you get that? Do you want to say it again? Here, let's get you on the mic.
Are we being judged on the impact we have independently in our community, or is it more so us versus other teams' impact?
Sorry, is it relative to your community? So like if you're in a community of 2,000 and you reach every person in that community versus a team that's in a community of 10,000 and they only reach 3,000?
Right, basically.
Okay.
I guess the comment that I would make is that there are several different ways that a chairman's team can set themselves apart. One of those ways is to have an impact just on the students on the team. Are you really changing lives? Are you helping students make a different choice for their future careers? In some cases, you may be having an impact on your local community, or as we've discussed at length here today, having an impact on teams outside of your immediate area. Any one of those three paths could easily lead to recognition for your achievements and accomplishments. The one thing I would encourage you to do is don't try to do all three. Focus on or 3 or 4. There's many different paths. Focus on what you're good at. Pick something that you think you can excel at and focus on that for your team.
I think a lot of times when we get questions like this, we answer in generalities, and we're always like, yeah, it's relative to your communities, people from small communities can do this. But I think there's a belief out there that it's like, well, Chairman's is still a high resource award. You have to have those sorts of resources. So I want to give everyone a specific example. The last time we had a championship event in person, 2019, one of the Chairman's finalists was Team 5672 from Ontario. They are from Manitoulin Island. Has anyone heard of Manitoulin Island in here? Good. Thank you. Someone who's probably been to Canada. Manitoulin Island is a small island in a lake, and it is the community is 99.8% Indigenous. Team 5672 is an incredibly low resource team. They depend on grants, but what they did is they spread first within this island community, and they got a Lego League team going, and more kids involved in first or whatever. They not only won the Chairman's Award at the competitive Waterloo District event, they also won it at the Ontario Provincial Championship, and then came to Worlds and were a World Championship finalist. So I think it's important go take a look at that essay. It's online, and you can see that it's not about quantity. It's about quality relative to your surroundings and what you can do. So it's what we said about checklists earlier, and that you need to go to, international country X and do an exchange trip or whatever. Focus on if you focus on what you can do within your set of resources, and over the past 2 years, the executive summary has changed and allows you to speak specifically to, wait, what's the wording on that? It's like, how does your team address the unique opportunities and circumstances? That's where you talk about, yeah, our community is only 3,000 people, but to give the judges that sense of context. That question was written specifically so the judges could be more aware, and you didn't have to use, because almost to a certain degree, the essay used to punish teams who had the fewer resources, because you had to use like 500 characters in your essay to describe them. But that's why that question exists. So there's lots of opportunities there, but I'm serious about like the homework. Check out 5672's essay from 3 years ago. You might look at it and be like, oh, this doesn't seem like a Chairman's Award winning thing, but guess what? The judges thought it was because they saw the massive impact there.
I think you made a very good point. It's not about the size of your team, it's the size of the impact that those students are having. And likewise, you can do it with a team that's that small, or if you have a large team, we're going to expect some things from that team as well. We want to make sure that the whole team is engaged in these activities, not just 2 or 3 people.
Okay. Next question.
How much does like physical representation of what you do impact your actual presentation? So like pamphlets and imagery like pictures and slideshows. How do the judges view that? Does it take away from our presentation? Does it add? So, yeah.
I'd say that sometimes we get a lot of handouts and booklets and things, but whatever you have, make sure that we can easily get the message from it. We don't have time to read something this thick, but whether it's your presentation or whether it's handouts, these are things that would be best to give us the most succinct message you can about your team. Let it demonstrate the breadth of your team, the things you do, the things you value are important, because we don't have a lot of time to look at things, but the things we want to look at are the ones that you get your message across to us as best you can.
Well, one of the things that you need to always bear in mind, as Priscilla said, is that we have very limited time. We have just a few minutes before the next team walks in the door. What I often encourage teams to do is when you give us a 3-inch notebook, also give us a 1-page summary of what's in it. If you can give us 1 or 2 pages of bullet points, that's something that we can peruse very quickly in the few moments we have before the next team shows up. Now, the value of the notebook, just so everyone's clear on this, is that when your team bubbles up to the final evaluation, where we're deliberating for which of a number of great teams are going to be selected, judges who didn't have the opportunity to see your presentation are going to use that notebook as a way to learn about your team. The judges essentially get into a role in the final deliberation where we're advocating for a team. Priscilla and I said, well, we had team 1, 2, 3 in our room. We were, excuse me, we were particularly impressed by this. And the other judges say, huh? So they can go to the notebook and they say, oh, I see what you're talking about. It's here in their notebook. Okay. So all the time you spend putting together that thick notebook is valuable. But don't expect us to read that in 3 minutes between teams. Give us a 1 or 2 page summary. And that's really of more value to us in terms of the instant evaluation. The other thing that's kind of related to that is don't, again, it comes back to this, don't confuse us. Sometimes you'll have people talking and they've got a video presentation running on the side. Sometimes it's their chairman's video, sometimes it's a totally separate presentation. They're talking and there's a computer playing some kind of a video, and we're wondering, okay, which one are we supposed to be watching? So don't confuse us. We're easily confused sometimes. Handout information is very useful, but the presentation needs to be focused on the speakers, not cluttered up with a video background, unless the video, in fact, is your presentation, if that makes sense. Okay.
Really quickly, I want to give a plug for the documentation form if your team isn't using that. I judged chairmans at a few regional events this year, and it came in handy, and I will tell you it did change the outcome a few times. I've seen that happen, and I've heard of that happening. So it's a great way for the judges just to be like, yeah, they really did do all that, or I have a question about this. So please use it. And if you don't know what we're talking about, look on the first website. It's there.
Okay. Question here.
As coaches, mentors, and judges, all the above, how do you encourage your team members and your teams to do good for goodness sake and not just to win this award? How do you get them to want to do it, carry it on, and do that in the future? So not just to win the award. How do you kind of nourish that on your teams?
So that's a tough question, because that not just applies in first, that applies in life. How do we get people to do the right thing and do things without being incentivized? I think at its core, a lot of it has to be enjoyable. If you look at this room here is like 85% high school students, and y'all are being pulled in so many different directions right now in your lives. You're trying to get into post-secondary, you're trying to work part-time jobs, you're trying to have a life, you're trying to build robots. There's a lot going on. And I think it's important that the good that you're trying to do as a mentor aligns with the good that the kids want to do, because they're going to be more likely to do it. That's one big piece. Like, if you're constantly feeling that it's an uphill battle to get them motivated, excited about these things, maybe that means there's something in the culture there, but it might just be that it's not what they're into. And so I think it's really to let the students drive the type of outreach. I think that if your team has a strong culture, the students will gravitate towards doing good. But how do you establish culture? That's a whole other presentation that we could give for 2 hours on this sort of thing. But I think, like a lot of the things that we've talked about today, it's about finding what's in the wheelhouse. And it may change from year to year. Some students may be really focused into one thing, and then a couple of years later, they're like, yeah, that's not our thing. But to try and find that. But I think also when teams are trying to do good with chairmans, it's about culture change, and it's usually trying to fix a problem. And first is a community composed of problem solvers. So trying to illustrate not just the fix but like, what's the problem we're trying to solve? It's like, hey, the literacy rates in this neighborhood are really poor, and there's like poor outcomes coming to this. So that's why we're focusing on getting these programs in here. I don't know, I think when you see why it's important, that might help people recognize why they should be doing it. I don't know.
Can I make a quick comment?
It definitely starts with like why you're doing that outreach program. If the Chairman's Award went away next year, would you keep doing it? If the answer is no, then like don't even bother in the first place, right? Do what you guys are passionate about. Do what you guys are good at. That the things you're doing should be impacting your community, and it should be like directly helping your students in the same way. Everything we did in 2016, those years I was in, those 4 years, it was to make sure that we had first in Las Vegas. Like, that was a big push for us. So it was mutually beneficial. So that's a good way to look at it.
So most of our ideas that our team does come from the students. And I think my job as a mentor is to say, how can we make this more impactful? How can we make it bigger? What community partners can we bring in? How can we form an alliance? How can we take, like, literacy? I want to do a book read at XYZ Elementary. Okay, how can we take that and make it bigger? How can we make it sustainable? So, and as a mentor, I think that's important, because you're teaching the students then, that's an awesome, great idea, but how do you make it big? How do you include more people? How do you make it sustainable? And that's, when you do that, you have the answer to one of the executive summary questions, which is, how did you make it big? How did you make it scalable?
One of the things my dad used to always say is that we do this for the reward, not for the award. And the reward is making an impact on our community and changing the lives of other kids. And I think that's what we just focused on. We made some decisions. You have to go back in time to 2017 and being an Australian team coming to America. We made some decisions that year that we thought were going to cost us the Chairman's Award. But we did it because we thought it was the right thing to do. And that was a whole team decision. And I mean, it worked out. It's kind of funny to say it now, but we really did think that we were going to lose it because of some things we said.
And just to close this one out, if you can think of reasons to get people to do good, that alone is a reason to win the Chairman's Award, because this is something our society needs more of. And so this is like a complex problem that exists in so many different realms. So that's a great question.
What Sarah said about doing some things that might have cost us the Chairman's Award, we actually debated not even submitting for the Chairman's Award at one point, because we were like, is holding us back. We want to do things, and we don't want to think about submitting something. We don't want to do things just to tick a box, like Karthik said. We don't want to have to do that. So it's really important to think about that and think, like someone else said, if the Chairman's Award went away, would you still do it? Would you decide to not do the Chairman's Award just to do more, just to do good?
Okay, well, go ahead.
Real quickly, I agree with what everyone else has said about letting the students drive your outreach. Students have ideas that they want to do, and it's our job to make that happen. But on a less serious note, one thing that we've had a lot of success with is we make our outreach fun. And our job as mentors is, when we're done with an outreach event, we take the kids out for ice cream. We make sure that they have a good time so that they come back to the next meeting and get all of their friends to want to do the next event.
Okay, thank you guys. We're very close to the end of this. You in the back, question, and then I know we're over time, but let's go ahead. Why don't you stand up? I'll get the mic to you so you can be loud. And maybe one more question after that.
So, do you have any tips or advice for teams that maybe have less funding or less sponsors or even smaller teams as to how we can make an impact on our very local communities? Because as opposed to teams that are more international or larger, how can we focus on that quality over quantity?
I think it's hard for us to give a generic tip because you know your community. And so it's identifying what's needed in your community and then going deep. So instead of trying to do this broad one where it's like, so you could say, oh, we impacted X number of students. Everyone's so into creating these big numbers. Excuse me. Why not work on a smaller number and try and be a little bit more in depth where, it's like we focused on this one community, this one extracurricular group of 10 students, and we provided something enriched, something more in depth. I think as opposed to trying to get that broad impact and playing this ridiculous chairman's numbers game where it's like, we affected 6 million, stop. Just focus on something very direct and get that deep, immersive experience.
Okay, I'll try. Find partners in your community. That's what we've done with almost every one of our projects. Find sponsors if you can specifically. Look at grants. Some of our larger things were funded through the STEM Diversity and Equity grant that FIRST provides. So we've applied for that almost every year the last, I think, 4 or 5 years since it came out originally. So that's one area for funding where if what you're doing aligns with what that grant is. But at one point, we went to our library to help us with the project, and they actually had a donor that had given them some money that they weren't quite sure what to do with, and they were able to fund our project with that. So look for those community partners. Make alliances. That's what we do, right? We make alliances, bring another strength.
So I have 2 things. The first thing is going off what Karthik said. So one of the things that we did, because we realized that sometimes in areas we didn't have a lot of numbers, and that was okay. But we realized we still wanted to tell that story, and we still wanted the judges to know that we did it. But what the judges want to see, the word they use is measurable. And measurable doesn't just mean numbers. It means if you met a person and you changed their life, if they found something that they loved and you knew about it, why wouldn't you tell that? So we put in our presentation, our essay, we put the lives that we thought that we changed, the people that we were inspired by the things that we've done. And that's not a big thing. You don't have to have so many people in your community. You don't have to have impacted hundreds and thousands of people. Just seeing that you were passionate enough to impact that person's life is really important. And the second thing, if I can remember, is that a lot of the times for sponsorship and resources, we don't even realize our biggest strength. As students, you do have parents, and they're not just mom and dad. They do have jobs, they do have lives, they do have friends, and they're really helpful. If you ask them, hey mom, hey dad, is there anyone that you know that could help us with, we're having a problem with our intake? Oh yeah, I know someone that is really good at mechanical engineering. And you don't really have to look very far. It's not as hard as people think.
Thanks, Jay. Anybody here?
Yeah, so people like to be on a part of a winning or a successful team. And so if what you can do in your community right now is go out and start one first Lego League team, or you one small project and make it really, really, really successful because you've focused all of your time on that, the potential donors and sponsors in your community are going to respond to that, and they're going to want that to grow. So don't focus on the bigger picture right now if that's not what you can do. Focus on what you can do, and then grow baby steps from there.
Well, one or two more comments, and then we're going to probably close it down.
So most of Bacon's programs cost almost nothing because we have to pay for our own build space. So much money goes to that. So almost all of our programs cost, we don't have a budget for outreach. We don't start teams. We don't have the money to start teams. So not everything that you can make an impact with costs money. Brainstorm. There are lots of ways to make an impact.
Go ahead, you good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Thank you, guys. I know there's a lot of questions that we didn't get a chance to ask. I do want to appreciate all the time that our panelists have been here. And you know who they are now. You see their faces and you know their names. So go find them and ask them your questions. Karthik?
I just want to add a couple things. If you want some direct feedback probably after the championship, check out our website, which the URL is
FirstHallOfFame.org.
Thank you, Elise. Reach out there. Also, I'm going to spend some time in the booth tomorrow, so if you will have specific questions, come on by. And I think some of the other reps who have a little bit of bandwidth will be in the booth as well to answer questions.
Okay. Let's hear it for our panelists and our judges today. And to all those teams that are competing this competition for the championship chairmans, all the best of luck. Take care. Have a good night, everybody. Be safe.